Hey guys, I'm Modern Day James, and this week I wanted to bring you something a little bit different. I noticed last week when I was creating a vehicle design tutorial that it ended up being more of a discussion of perspective and fundamentals than it was about design. So I thought it would be a good idea to create a series on fundamental skills. That way if I use any techniques that you're unfamiliar with in the future, I can always refer you back to these videos. I think perspective is one of the most important skills to develop as an artist, and it's often the most overlooked. It's essential for an artist to see forms rather than shapes, and be able to see things in 3 dimensions. You'll start to see that drawing anything is as simple as breaking it down into primitive forms. Cubes, spheres, cylinders, and cones. A lot of what I'll be covering today is pulled from Scott Robertson's How to Draw. I highly suggest this book if you're trying to learn fundamentals. I'll leave a link to it in the description. You should also check out Scott Robertson's other books at designstudiopress.com. And with that, let's get started with some drawing exercises that we can use to improve our draftsmanship. An important habit for us to break out of is that scratchy line technique where we go back and forth very haphazardly until we come up with what seems like the correct line. Instead, I want us to create very strong, confident lines. There's no need to go back and forth if we know exactly where our pen should start and where it should end. So the first exercise I'm going to have us do is just to create straight lines. You can do this when you're sitting at your couch watching TV, whatever you're doing. Just really work on that draftsmanship. I want everyone to feel comfortable with making a straight line. The next thing I want to do is create freehand circles in between the lines that we've just made. I'll typically tilt the page for this. Everybody has an angle of drawing that they're comfortable with. For me, it's around a 45-degree angle. I left the paper straight here for the sake of the video, but choose whatever angle is comfortable to your hand. You'll notice I ghost over it a few times before actually committing to creating a line. This ensures that you make the most accurate circle that you can. I'm going to create another set of straight lines, but I'm going to add textures in between them this time. I'm looking at various reference photos when I'm doing this. Really try to use your imagination and come up with different ways to represent different textures. While these aren't the best examples, I hope that they show that there's many different ways to create texture with your pen. Think of different types of materials that you'd want to render, and then try your hand at it. Another great exercise for building up confidence in your draftsmanship is creating 3 dots and then drawing a curve through them. You'll notice again I ghost over it a few times before I commit to creating that curve. So let's talk about our first type of perspective, which is 1 point. A typical scenario that you would see this in is if you're looking straight down a street, railroad tracks, a hallway. In 1 point perspective, parallel lines will converge to a singular point on the horizon line, known as the vanishing point. In order to generate a rectangular prism in this perspective, I create 4 parallel lines that converge at the vanishing point and connect them via horizontals. Note that I'm drawing through the rectangular prism as if it were invisible. This is called drawing through. This prism is below the horizon line, but you can essentially do the same thing above the horizon line or even going through the horizon line. By drawing the prism above the horizon line, we create the illusion that we're looking up at it. In our 2-point perspective scenario, we're essentially doing the same thing, but now instead of having one vanishing point, we now have 2. This situation would arise, say we were to look at a building at an angle instead of straight on. We're going to create form the same way we did previously, by making vertical lines emerging from our parallel lines. By extending the top vertices of our vertical lines back to the vanishing points, we create our form. Since this prism is below the horizon line, it creates the illusion that we are looking down on it. The opposite effect is achieved when you take the canvas and rotate it 180 degrees. It now looks as though we're looking up at it. In our 3-point perspective scenario, we essentially have the same thing again, except now our vertical lines are converging to a point that's going to be below the paper. I'm estimating the convergence of the vertical lines, but you can be more precise by creating a dot or keeping the vanishing point on the paper. Now I'm just adding a little extra line weight to emphasize the form. The next video is going to go into detail about how we can create curves and then mirror them in perspective. This will serve a more practical purpose once we start doing vehicle sketches. Anyway, if you like the video, please subscribe. I'm going to be putting out new content every week. I have another channel where I'm putting out all my music, and that's youtube.com/moderndayjamesmusic. Alright guys, hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you again next week.